A mother covers her child's eyes. A black shape hangs at the edge of town, creaking in the wind. Crows hop along a beam, pecking at what used to be a face. This is not a battlefield. This is the schoolyard of medieval justice, a lesson you can smell before you can read. Stay with me, because in a moment we'll walk into a city where murder happens so often you could trip over it on the way to buy bread. And somehow, almost nobody swings. Jump with me to England, year 1202. The northern city of Lincoln has about 7,000 souls. In that single year, the records count 114 murders, 89 robberies with violence, and 65 woundings. Do the math? That's a killing roughly every 3 days. Now here's the gut punch. Only 2 people are executed. 2. Either criminals were incredibly lucky, or the legal system was a sieve you could row a boat through. Which one do you think it is, lucky or sieve? Type your pick and keep it ready, because the trail winds through pulpits, juries, taverns, forests, and the shadow of the gallows. To understand medieval crime and punishment, start with fear. Law and order rested on the assumption that people behave only when they fear pain more than they desire anything else. The Catholic Church wasn't background noise, it was the amplifier. Canon law ran alongside royal law, and your tongue could doom you as fast as your knife. Thomas Aquinas, yes, that Aquinas argued that blasphemy could be more grievous than murder because it struck at God, not merely at a neighbor. Imagine living in a world where one reckless sentence in an alehouse might weigh heavier than a body in the street. Don't exhale yet. The punishments made the sermons sound merciful. Across medieval Europe, the penalty menu read like a horror catalog. Garroting in parts of Spain, mutilation in German lands, flogging or branding in England, drowning or burning in certain contexts, and public shame for dessert. Some Islamic jurisdictions of the period used stoning or the stake for specific offenses. Severity was global, not provincial. The point wasn't subtlety, it was spectacle. Sentences were something you saw and could not unsee: smoke, heat, iron, and silence. Sounds like perfect deterrence, right? Then why was Lincoln soaked in blood? Because terror is a terrible policeman when the roads lead into dark forests. Medieval geography favored the runner. Between towns lay woods big enough to swallow a man whole. There were no street lamps, no forensics, and in most places, not even salaried police, an exception reserved for a few rich Italian city-states. If you stabbed someone in a brawl, you didn't need a lawyer. You needed good boots. Vanish into the trees, angle toward a monastery, and you might never be found. And if you were caught, guilt often depended less on evidence than on reputation, and on who owed whom a favor. Theft, meanwhile, was the people's crime. Hunger, envy, debt, and opportunity motives haven't changed. But punishment swung wildly with the map. Watch this cut. Southern France, 1353. A woman in the village of Myrval washes her clothes in a stream, spreads them on a frame to dry, and returns to find her cloak gone. A 15-year-old is arrested. He's convicted and banished from the village for 3 months. Now smash cut to London, 1417. Edmund H. Chapel of Finsbury is convicted of stealing a horse, 4 bolts of cloth, and some other goods. The jury says, hang him, and hang him they do. 2 thefts, 2 verdicts, 2 different planets. Why? Because justice wore a local costume and answered to local nerves. If you like high stories, meet the Warrants of Soul, Norfolk. In 1321, sisters Marjorie and Matilda and their brother Richard are accused of stealing goods, no conviction. Later that year, another sister is accused again, no conviction. Then, brother John is nailed for stealing clothes and other items worth 8 shillings. Pause and feel that number. When an average laborer earns roughly 3 pennies a day, 8 shillings equals about a month's wages. That crosses the 12 pence threshold for serious. John is hanged. The rope doesn't scare the others for long. By 1325, all 4 siblings are jailed for stealing cloth worth 60 shillings, and the jailer is told to treat them forte et dure, strong and hard, likely torture. They still beat the charges before a jury. The following year, they're indicted again, 32 cloths in February, another 40 shillings worth in August, and acquitted twice. Did they reform? Or just get better at running? Or lean closer? Did someone inside the system hold the door? Trials were fast, and character weighed more than facts. The question wasn't what happened, so much as who are you? If jurors knew your family or your money, your odds brightened. Corruption wasn't a rumor, it was a workflow. In 1249, merchants from Brabant complained to King Henry III that they'd been robbed in Hampshire, home to busy Southampton and Royal Winchester. Suspects were caught and acquitted because jurors were accomplices. And at the very top, Sir William Thorpe, Chief Justice of the King's Bench, was jailed in 1350 for taking bribes. If the high bench had sticky fingers, imagine the low one. Maybe the warrants didn't only dodge evidence, maybe they bought supper for the jury. Before you despair, there was one door a hunted man could still reach: sanctuary. Duck into a church, preferably a big one, with friendly cannons, and the law had to stop at the threshold. In much of Europe, you had 40 days to bargain, confess, or plan departure. In England, the clock was far kinder. There was no fixed limit, though in the 12th century, sanctuary usually led to permanent exile once you stepped out. You'd avoid the rope, but you'd lose your country. Quick question. Which would you choose, prison in filth with rats and fever, or barefoot exile with a thin hope to start over? Type prison or exile below and don't hedge. Sanctuary wasn't a game, and breaking it was like spitting in a judge's face. One day, a goldsmith named Lawrence Duckett fled to street. Mary LeBeau after a fight with a man named Ralph, who'd been walking with his mistress Alice. Ralph survived his wounds. Lawrence did not. He was found hanging inside the church. People said he killed himself in shame. Then, a hidden witness stepped forward. He'd watched Alice and a gang of Ralph's friends enter the church and lynch Lawrence from a window mullion. Sanctuary violated, verdict inevitable. Alice was burned the standard execution for a murderess, and 15 male accomplices were hanged. The line around sacred space was bright, and crossing it burned everyone. But suicide could erase lines altogether, because the dead could be criminals too. From the 6th century, the church considered self-murder a kind of homicide. By the 12th, civil law joined in. A suicide cheated his lord of service, so the crown took the goods. In early 15th century France, the house of a suicide could be demolished, fields burned, woods cut down, corpses might be dragged through streets or burned as warnings. In England, the dead were buried at crossroads with a stake through the heart, the logic chilling and literal pin the spirit, or at least confuse it so it wanders the wrong road to haunt someone else. If that sounds like fear doing paperwork, that's exactly what it was. Meanwhile, society criminalized a swarm of petty behaviors: gambling, scolding, vagrancy, certain sexual acts, even eavesdropping. Stack them together and you see a project bigger than punishment: control. The state and the church tried to manage noise, movement, words, and reputation. The gibbet at the town's edge taught one lesson. The fine for idle tongues taught another. Together, they spelled out, stay in your lane. Still, the Lincoln numbers keep jabbing us in the ribs. Why did so few hang after so much blood? Some answers are simple. Murder hides well when towns are small and neighbors are scared. Families prefer compensation to executions. A guilty man can pay a price, a dead one can't. Kings need soldiers and harvesters. You can't reap wheat with corpses. Juries were local, and local ties are strong. And here's the twist we keep circling. The law loved terror, but daily life loved negotiation, cash, kin, and quiet deals that never reached a parchment roll. None of this made medieval Europe soft. Punishments were public for a reason. A thief's ear on a post spoke for months. A branded cheek wrote a resume you could never edit. Stocks humiliated the living. Traitors' heads humiliated the dead. Execution days were grim carnivals, meat pies, cheap ale, shouted prayers. Children learned how the world worked, while vendors hawked wares. Fear traveled better than paper. But a system obsessed with fear will always breed workarounds. Sanctuary, bribes, flight, juries with long memories and short tempers. Let's step inside a courtroom and feel the speed. No months of discovery, no armies of lawyers. The accused stands. Neighbors speak. The sheriff nods. The jury, often men who drink in the same tavern as the accused or the victim, decides quickly. Sometimes the judge never lifts a quill. The outcome is a foregone conclusion delivered with ritual. Evidence is less about objects and more about oaths, gestures, and status. Did the accused keep fasts? Does he fight on holy days? Did his father serve a lord well? Character bleeds into verdict like wine into wool. If you think that's unfair, you're right. If you think it's efficient, so did they. Now cut to a different stage, the road. A merchant caravan moves toward Southampton. The wagons creak, the guards yawn. In a shallow valley, a gang steps out. Blades flash, ropes cinch, oaths fly. By sunset, the gang is gone, the goods split. The jurors, some of them briefed on what to say. If a complaint reaches the king, it hits a web of favors and fatigue. The crown wants peace and taxes, not endless manhunts. If local elites are complicit, justice stalls. And if one of the robbers is a minor knight, good luck. The law bends toward the well-armored. Let's not forget the tavern, the medieval courtroom of the poor. Under low beams and thick smoke, men wager, brag, insult. One careless oath at the wrong ear can put you in chains. Blasphemy isn't abstract, it's a live wire. Imagine you've had ale, your grief boils, your tongue leaps. Someone repeats your words to a church officer who owes them a favor. Suddenly you're standing before a court where the weight of your sentence is not measured in bruises you caused, but in syllables you uttered. Would you plead truth or beg mercy? Click pause for 2 seconds and answer with one word. Return to the warrants one last time. They teach 3 rules of surviving the era. Strike where the law is thin. Share profits with people who wear good clothes. And when the rope tightens, get inside a church. Their record looks like luck until you see the scaffolding, dispersed policing, purchasable verdicts, and a culture that prized reputation over proof. If that scaffolding feels uncomfortably familiar, say it out loud. History isn't a mirror, but it's very good glass. Now imagine the edge cases, the people who weren't thieves or killers, but still felt the whip of control. A loud woman who scolds in the market, a gambler who loses loud and wins louder, a drifter who sleeps under a cart. The law writes them into the ledger as problems to be solved, rather than citizens to be heard. The punishment might be a fine, the stocks, a brand, or banishment. The goal is not just to hurt, it's to label. Labels survive the bruise. Let's try a thought experiment. You've killed a man in a fight. The family offers to drop charges if you pay compensation and swear never to return. Option A, you accept, sell everything, and walk into exile, trading your old name for bread in a new town. Option B, you gamble on a jury of nervous neighbors. Option C, you sprint for a church and clutch a cross, daring the sheriff to pull you off it. Which path buys you the most life? Right A, B, or C? There's no right answer, only the one you could live with. We should also talk about prisons, because they were not designed for long stays or rehabilitation. Jails were holding pens. Bad food, worse air, disease as common as fleas. Many died awaiting judgment. Survival was a lottery of coin and luck. Against that backdrop, sanctuary followed by exile looks almost merciful. A road and a new name beat a fever in a stone box. Even so, punishment performed a civic ritual. A hanging drew a crowd. A branding hissed like a public oath. A woman burned at the stake sent a message about order and gender as much as about crime. Children learned from what they saw, and the lesson folded into their bones. The community defends itself by making examples. The question was whether those examples changed behavior or just taught better hiding. By now, you can see why Lincoln's gallows didn't empty the streets. Harsh codes shouted, but enforcement whispered. Communities bargained, juries shielded, churches sheltered. Kings needed bodies for war and hands for harvest, and forests swallowed the rest. The gibbet was a billboard. It didn't catch anyone. It sold a message. And yet, messages matter. Ask yourself, if you lived under those beams and bells, would fear make you kinder or just quieter? Here's the last twist. Medieval justice wasn't random chaos. It was a rough architecture built out of terror, negotiation, and theater. Terror lived in the punishments, negotiation in the jury room and the church porch, theater in the market square where sentences were performed. Some people were crushed by it. Some slipped through it. Most learned to live around it carefully. And that brings us back to the creaking shape at the town's edge. It's still out there in the wind, lesson and threat. Somewhere, a clerk dips a quill to record that one more felon chose exile over fever, one more jury ate on someone else's coin, one more mouth learned that a loose oath can weigh more than a blade. The rope hums. The bell waits. And we, looking back, can finally see why so much violence coexisted with so little official blood. If this rewired the way you picture medieval justice, comment the one choice you'd make: prison, exile, bribery, or sanctuary, and tell me why.